Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Lorraine Wood. I'm the Director of Arena, and I'm delighted to welcome you to Arena's virtual event today, Wholesale, the Road to Recovery, together with our headline sponsor, TWC, the Wholesale company, who are the leading intelligence and technology consultancy. Before we start, I'm conscious many of you may not know who Arena is or what we do. So for those who don't actually know us, we are a membership-based hospitality and food service networking organisation that's been established for nearly 35 years now. And through our portfolio of live events, our aim is very much to provide an educational, engaging and inspirational platform for our members to create new business relationships, catch up with industry friends and colleagues, and also hear from industry speakers, whilst at the same time experiencing the hospitality of some wonderful venues. But COVID-19 has suspended that for the time being. So with the help from Arena member William Murray PR Marketing and also 23 Digital Video Agency, we've gone virtual and launched a series of events entitled Ask Arena, which really aims to bring people together to hear from industry leaders and provide practical, honest advice and knowledge you can take back to your businesses. So that's enough from me. So can I briefly hand you over to James Beer from 23 Digital to give you a brief summary of the company and just a few tips on getting the best out of today's event. So James, over to you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Yeah, hi, my name is James Beer, and you might be wondering who I am and why I'm here. I've been helping Lorraine deliver these virtual events for the past year, and it started at the beginning of COVID. So it's actually been one whole year now. And yeah, we've been helping Lorraine and her company deliver these, basically bringing the industry key speakers together to impart some great advice and knowledge, and it's been a great learning experience for me as well. Basically, I run a video agency called 23 Digital down in Brighton. I'm the creative director, and we deliver traditional videos and virtual events. Onto the housekeeping. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom. There is an anonymous box you can tick if you want to ask questions anonymously, and they will be answered at the end of the session. You're all on mute, but you can still drop messages in the chat if you want to. And the session will be recorded and will be up online after the event. Thank you.
Thanks, James. The other thing to add is if you'd like to follow us on Twitter and tweet about today's event, you can follow us at Arena Networking, and the hashtag is #AskArena. So we're now on to the first part of our event, and I'm delighted to have with us today Tom Fender, Development Director from TWC, who will share their latest exclusive consumer trends research. So can I please introduce Tom?
Good morning, everybody. I hope you are all well, and thank you, Lorraine, for the introduction. So hopefully everyone can see the screen now. I've passed the IQ test, and I'm here for about next 13-14 minutes just to give you an overview. So thank you for the introduction a minute or so ago about TWC. I suspect quite a few people have heard of us, and maybe a number of people haven't heard of us. So just a really, really quick introduction. We're a business which has about 100 years between the senior management, about 100 years worth of wholesale experience. Our business takes data with its objective to make it more accessible and more useful to both wholesalers and suppliers so that they can grow their business. We work with the likes of Spa Scotland, Country Range Group, Unitas, Caterforce, and suppliers as well. Suppliers a bit like Boost Energy Drinks, all good friends of ours. A lot of businesses have data which they need more access to make more decisions, better decisions, and that's what we do. And we also have a number of digital platforms which make all of this better. So what we also have recognised that while having huge amounts of sales data helps us access insights and information, what we also need to do is look to the future more. And sometimes we need to speak to people to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. So in 2020, we launched something called TWC Trends, bit of a soft launch to begin with. And I'm focusing on kind of half a dozen different issues, as you see here. This information is available to you. and most of it is even free of charge. But this is all to launch in 2021 with a kind of a formal program called TWC Trends, so that we can understand from consumers, but also as the year progresses through food service operators and convenience retailers, actual owners of businesses, what they're thinking and what they're feeling about the world around them. We have just commissioned, we've just done the latest piece of research, or the first piece of research for 2021. We've spoken to just shy of 1,200 consumers. We obviously had to leave it as late as possible. We did the research last week so that we could get as close to today's date to make it as useful and relevant to today's date as possible. Over 150 questions included in the research, very, very, very broad. In fact, all of the panelists who you're going to hear from after me contributed questions which they themselves or their colleagues within their businesses wanted to hear. So this is coming very much live from the movers and shakers of the business to help them improve their businesses as well. It does cover food service in a huge amount of detail, but also small format retail or independent retail. The two are obviously kind of inextricably linked. And over the last 12 months, you would argue that convenience retail, one of the reasons it's benefited so well is because of the closure of food service. So if I was a wholesaler who served both food service and convenience retail, I'd be interested to see how the next 6 months pans out. The information we're going through right now, but gets formally launched in 2 weeks today. That's a little bit of the introduction. As I say, there's 150 questions. I'm not going through all of that. I'm just cherry picking a selection of findings, which will hopefully be useful for James's Q&A and panel discussion, which follows straight after myself. So what are the headlines? And I haven't done 5,000 charts or a million facts or figures, but I've got a little bit of a story to tell. And the story is as follows. There is huge eagerness to return to hospitality. People have been stuck at home, you know that better than me, and they're keen to reconnect. There is quite a bit of nervousness which remains, which would be quite understandable after the year we have. Not everybody is wholly comfortable to rush straight back out, but I suspect that will change over time. We'll see that in a little while's time. Some people are keen to return to hospitality after receiving, but only after receiving their first and second vaccination. And obviously that might take a little bit of time. We asked this question in February as well, and have repeated it in March just to see if there was major shifts. There's been a little shift, not significantly. The one thing which I would say is that it might be assumed, you'd be quite fair to assume that maybe older consumers, maturer consumers are the ones who are nervous and the young kids are blissfully delighted to get straight out there. Actually, that is not the case. Younger consumers, those who are 25 to 34, are almost as nervous as those who are older as well. Which came as a bit of surprise. However, as we're approaching in England the 12th of April date, where we'll be able to have hospitality, certainly in outdoor settings, 23% of the population is happy to do that and are planning to use hospitality. Put that in old money or in round numbers, that's about 10 million people. And that will increase as we go through, either because of more people are getting more jabs, the first or second, or because of the other lockdown dates, milestones which are approaching. So we are building up to a very prosperous summer, I would argue. People do have some concerns. They are still going to be checking COVID-19 safety and hygiene policy. And so it is going to be something which is going to be front of mind. So I think as wholesalers could be advising their customers and their members, their food service operators, I think one of the things which is going to be really, really important is this whole point of reassurance, making sure that you are doing whatever you can to communicate what you're doing, why you're doing it, how often you're doing it, and to what certain standards you are. Because at the back of the mind, while we want to reconnect, at the back of my mind, we still have the safety of COVID lurking there. Consumers think that technology can play a huge part in making the environment safer. That is booking online, paying online, reducing the amount of human contact within a hospitality, eating out in environment. So technology is potentially a big game changer. This might come as a slight disappointment to some people, but what consumers have said is, listen, I'm desperate to get back out there, and a number of them have said, quite a large percentage have said, listen, if we can reduce the kind of face-to-face, the human interaction, but that's because that's going to make the environment or the premise safer, then that's okay. I know that might come as a slight disappointment because kind of that human interaction or the human touch is something which makes hospitality so wonderful. But, you know, for the short term, I think we just need to understand that people are aware that, you know, diseases are transmitted. So what we can do to reduce face-to-face contact between staff and customers should be one which we should want to look at. And that's the point I've just said. Human interaction is still important, but actually staying safe is slightly more important. I've kind of covered all of the watch out bits first of all. I thought I'd get that over and done with first, because most of the rest of the information and the feedback from customers is overwhelmingly positive. They're desperate to connect, as I suspect most of us are in our own personal lives. They're really keen to get back and enjoy the atmosphere and the experience of being with people. They want to connect with friends and families, and just going out will feel like a special occasion, which I suspect all of us can resonate with. I'm showing you these facts and figures or these statements on here. I'll give you an indication. Between 60, 65, 70, 75 and 80% of people, consumers, are agreeing with these statements. So it's not just a very small minority, it is the overwhelming majority of people who are very keen to get that out there. Eating dishes I can't make. One of the other questions we've asked is, do you now consider yourself to be a good cook? And about 30-35% of the UK population say they have. That will have improved over the lockdown. So actually, well, as we're going out, there is an expectation that food has to be pretty good actually, because we want to get out, but also we have improved as chefs ourselves. The other thing, kind of connecting a few of those dots together, is that there is demand, or that there is appeal for going out on what others might say is kind of less busy nights of the week. There was quite a groundswell of feeling that consumers might avoid establishments on their very, very busy day. So there's an opportunity to entice or attract consumers at the earlier parts of the week, which hopefully would make things easier, give you a good consistent spread through the week. One of the other things which we have found, and again, there's some very positive news in here, there's one or two other ways of looking at it as well, but it's the whole thing around local. I guess consistent with the fact that a lot of people don't necessarily want to go into cities or do long distance travel at the moment. They do see that they want to be supporting outlets which are very, very close to where they live for the foreseeable future, probably for the next 6 months. There is significant concern that local pubs, bars, restaurants, coffee shops, anything to do with an independent hospitality or eating out venue could go out of business, and they want to support those businesses, and they want to support people. As you see, overwhelming, huge percentages. Again, 60-70% of people are saying that. Now, consistent with that, which sometimes is obviously harder for a business, they also think that local suppliers should be supported on local operators' menus as well. And that's great, that's consistent. We can see why consumers might want that. It's sometimes easier said than done, because we may be looking at trying to keep costs down, certainly for the first couple of months, and local may not necessarily always achieve it. But it does give you an indication of how people are looking to support their local communities. Everything is very, very local at the moment. There's been quite a bit of news news out there around, for quite a few people, actually lockdown has meant that they've saved a lot of money. In fact, I've heard figures of hundreds of millions, if not billions of pounds saved up, which people might be willing to splurge. So from consumers, about 40% of people say just let me get out there, I will throw a credit card at it and I'll spend whatever it takes. But actually about 30% are not saying that, are disagreeing with that. So I think we have to be a little bit picky. Obviously, lockdown has been very financially troublesome for quite a few people. About 60% of people are willing to pay a deposit, and they recognise that that will help the cash flow. And there's far greater appreciation of the financial position pubs and bars and restaurants have gone through in the last 12 months than maybe we often give them credit for. So consumers are willing to pay a deposit to secure a table. This may please people that certainly in the industry, is that certainly the majority of consumers are happy to and are expecting to pay more than what they would have paid for the same products and foods and drinks and meals pre the COVID, pre the pandemic. So so that doesn't mean that you can go willy-nilly and go crazy with the prices, but just to say that the appreciation from consumers is there and the sensitivity from consumers is there, and there is an expectation to pay a little bit more. Rather interestingly, some consumers, a fair old slug of them, have also said that they would do two things. They would either be happy to pay a monthly subscription and build up credits, which that they use at a local hospitality outlet, and also plainly on a charitable, altruistic perspective, they're so keen to keep businesses in business that even to make charitable donations. So I think there's a whole undercurrent of sensitivity and awareness towards independent food service and hospitality outlets. We don't want these businesses to go out of business, and we want to support them in our local communities. Fixed price menus, yes, they like that. Anything which suggests kind of a value proposition, but also making life simpler, and also kind of menus keep them a little bit simpler. That appeals to large percentages of population, over 50% of people who are planning to go out to hospitality businesses. We obviously looked at the whole thing around health, vegetarian, vegan, and the whole kind of experimental, as in trying dishes you may not necessarily try. This is an opportunity to re-engage with food and food service. Again, overwhelmingly yes. Interestingly, we asked people whether they were vegetarian and vegan, and about 5% of the population is vegan, but the percentage of people who would like to eat vegan food in hospitality outlets is far higher than 5%. So there's a kind of a whole health agenda around that, and sustainability as well. Coming back to that point I made just a few seconds ago, that while some people may have a little bit more money to spend, that is not necessarily the case for absolutely everybody. In fact, quite a few consumers are saying, I will be having to keep an eye on the pennies, but I do want to get back out there. Data, which is what our business is all around, is around how businesses are collecting, collating and using data. This is coming from consumers. This is not from food service operators. This is actually consumers who are saying that actually pubs and food service outlets should collect and use data better. There's a keenness for kind of a loyalty program or club programs or memberships, obviously much easier to done on a larger scale, but also I do know of kind of smaller businesses who've done it on a very, very local basis. In fact, often kind of coffee shops and delis do that. There seems to be, again, this appetite and appeal to connect and engage and support on a local level. Not everybody, but 40% of people would expect them to be added to a database, and then you can send me newsletters. The whole point around this is if we get very clever with this, if we understand who the people are using our outlets, we understand that they're vegan, we understand that they're vegetarian, we understand when their birthday is, we understand what they're celebrating is, we can then start tailoring our communications to people. We can start putting them in different pots and start segmenting our customer base, which I think is something which as we've gone through the last 12 months, looking further forward now, this could be a real opportunity to start accessing, gaining and using data better than we have done in the past. It's a real opportunity to be a point of difference. Last couple of slides now here is, again, those on kind of LinkedIn and other mainstream press will have noticed in the last couple of weeks that there's another groundswell of being a good boss or being a good employer. And what we've seen is that what consumers are saying is, taking everything which I've said in the past about supporting local, I also need to be reassured that they have been a good employer as well. So if they've looked after their staff, then they're more than likely to get my business. And another example of that is, the whole debate around if consumers give tips, then making sure that those tips actually go to the staff. So, being a good employer on a very local basis is really, really, really important. Here's my and finally slide from Trevor McDonald. Just a few other little bits and pieces, because I'm conscious that my time is running out. While a lot of people have been working at home, and some people will have to go back to work in offices, and that won't be applied to others, a lot of people who are workers or studying would be tempted to go to a pub to go and conduct their studies or work with laptops, as long as Wi-Fi and plug sockets and coffee and things like that was available. Obviously, a lot of restaurants have launched meal kits or takeaway services in the last 12 months. That has been recognised and appreciated by consumers, but also say don't expect that to drop off the side of the cliff. Carry on with doing that. I think there's a lot of businesses who, because of the outdoor eating, are investing a lot now in heaters, seating, blankets, all of that kind of thing to make it more appealing. What we asked is, if a food service or hospitality outlet has invested in that now, would you consider eating outdoors, drinking outdoors all year round? Obviously, if it's -20 and blowing a blizzard, probably not. Again, huge percentages say yes. There's this connectivity around outdoor consumption, being outdoors, which is obviously safer and more hygienic. We've obviously talked about restaurants. I haven't talked about today around cinemas, theatres, sports venues, sports clubs, venues like that. People are almost as keen to return to them and consume drinks and food in those kind of outlets as they are in kind of traditional restaurants and pubs and bars. QR codes is more appealing to consumers. If you're having to order, a QR code is more appealing to consumers than having to download app. There's a feeling that you have to, every time you go into a premise, you have to download that app. Consumers have told us they prefer QR codes. And I want to finish on one final point, because I think some people are, the whole thing around kind of travel and holidays is kind of very high on a lot of people's agendas today. And my final point is that we asked these 1,200 people, would you normally be holidaying abroad? And this year, will you be changing your plans and decide to holiday in the UK? 41% of UK citizens said that. And if you, again, put that into old money, that is about 20 million people. So summarising, people are desperate to use hospitality. There is a few concerns, so we need to go overboard to reassure. Consumers will be forgiving for a while around the price and the service. I think we have a great opportunity with data to collect it, use it, and then personalise. And I think all of us need to make sure that we're being as outstanding, as good an employer as we possibly can. That's me. Thank you for your time. I think what I now do is I pass back to Lorraine.
You do. Thanks ever so much, Tom. That was a really good presentation, very insightful and very optimistic. So thank you once again. So we're now on to the second part of our event today, which is our panel discussion. And don't forget to post your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens, because at the end, we're going to be welcoming Anita Murray from William Murray PR and Marketing to actually share the audience questions with our panel. So without further ado, can I please welcome our panel host, James Bilby, the Chief Executive of the Federation of Wholesale Distributors. Welcome, James. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Lorraine, and thank you, Tom, for an insightful presentation. So I'm going to introduce our panelists one by one, and then without further ado, we will kick off. And as Lorraine says, it is an interactive session, so please do put any questions you may have to the panel in the Q&A box. So in no particular order, I'd like to welcome Cole Rose, the Managing Director of the Country Range Group, and also the Chair of FWD, perhaps more importantly. Hugo Mahoney, the Chief Executive of Brakes. Welcome, Hugo. Dowd Pervez, MD of Bestway. Good morning, Dowd. And last but by no means least, Andrew Selly, the Chief Executive of Bidcore. So welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. You know, we've seen there from Tom a bit of insight about the impact of the pandemic on the sector. And I think it's almost, well, it's just over a year ago now that Boris Johnson made his announcement on that Monday to tell us all to stay at home, announcing the first lockdown perhaps slightly later than he could have done in retrospect. But clearly it's had a major impact on the sector. So Hugo, how did Brakes respond to the pandemic, and how have you dealt with the different lockdowns that we've seen throughout the last year?
Okay, thanks, James, and good morning, everybody. So look, I think we were all taken aback by the speed of the lockdown and the restrictions, and that put us all into a crisis management mode. And I think actually the whole industry showed great speed, great agility, and collaboration in working together through this. There were three sort of key assumptions that we came up with very quickly. The first, of course, is safety. So we were delivering to hospitals, to care homes. So getting the safety protocols right, the right use of PPE, making sure that we had our people trained was exceptionally important to get right very quickly. The second was the sort of protect the castle mentality. So protecting our customers, our suppliers, and of course our own business model. This was a huge, huge challenge to both our company and the industry. And wholesale economics work on service efficiency. So if you lose 70% of your volume pretty much overnight, you have to come up with a different model very quickly. And so we had to remodel ourselves. And then thirdly, of course, there were opportunities through COVID to serve the nation in a sort of rather more altruistic way. So we were delighted to serve the vulnerable with food service packages in conjunction with Bidfood and Andrew. We have delivered the mass testing kits into schools to ensure that that part of the recovery program works well. And who would have thought that Brakes product would have ended up on gondola ends in Sainsbury's? I mean, we all reacted very, very quickly to make sure that the nation was protected and well served and well fed. On your point about lockdown, I think the lockdowns have all had different flavors. And I just comment on the remobilization of each quickly. So the first, was all about the summer and peak demand. So that was about availability of new products that that we just didn't predict, like sachets. So there was a big industry effort to make sure that we could serve everybody in this big surge. The second, of course, was regional in nature. So there were huge variations in demand, who was open, how big Christmas was going to be, and how we could help customers put on a Christmas menu. And then this final lockdown and the remobilization, well, look, I think there are big questions in April of how big it is going to be. So it is all about when do customers come back and how do they come back, and how can we help them be creative with their menus so that they can deal with waste problems and things like that if the weather isn't as good as we all hope, and if they have to show some flexibility.
Yeah, I think we're going to come on to the restart in a subsequent question. But Dowd, if I could just turn to you briefly. Obviously, your business model is not just food service; it's obviously primarily on the retail side. What was your response to the pandemic with the different sides of your business?
Yeah, thank you, James. Yeah, it was very tale of two cities as such. So our priority, as Hugo said, was providing a safe environment for our colleagues. And then we were overrun by retailers who were, let's say, fulfilling panic buying, I suppose. So we ended up having to stock ration a lot of key SKUs. If you remember this time last year, toilet paper was worth more than gold. We had to ensure that certain products were fairly allocated among our customer base, loyal customers, delivered customers, collect customers. We also had to continue doing promotions and seeking supplier funding for promotions, because there's a huge proportion of products sold through our sector in retail, which is price mark packed. So if you remove the promotional funding, you reduce the margin for the wholesaler and the retailer. It's not suddenly that there's better margin for the wholesaler or the retailer. We also had to pivot very fast. So when we could see certain trends forming, we had to contact our suppliers, discuss them with them, and try and get the stock in and secure the stock in advance. And when that stock wasn't necessarily available, we had to look at alternatives. In one situation, we actually even put together opened a facility to take in toilet paper, an 80,000 square foot facility next to a factory. So, we had to do some quite extreme changes. And Hugo, some Brakes product ended up in our shelves as well. So you'd be pleased to know. We ended up having to cater for at-home consumption over instant consumption. So a lot of people will say convenience retail is impulse or instant consumption, but of course that changed very fast as many people started going shopping for their main weekly shop in local stores. We obviously had to lobby suppliers and seek support of yourself, James, and other bodies, and engage with DEFRA in relation to ensuring our channel, which is a fragmented channel, the retailers are fragmented at least, got a fair share of a finite amount of stock. And I think we had some decent success there. We had to make sure that we were also supporting community volunteer run stores like the Plunkett Foundation, some food banks which were contacting us, and local authorities as well. In relation to the food service and catering side, yes, we all, I think, saw a pretty significant fall initially, especially in the first lockdown, where everything went a bit more insane than it did in the second or third lockdowns. I think what we saw fairly quickly was a bounce back in fast food, and we focused hard on fast food. We also took the opportunity to take to get our colleagues to focus on the range that we've got, the short life we've got to manage the stock holding down, to reduce the exposure, to work with our contract customers to make sure they had excellent service and the range that they needed. And in some cases, did they need the range they had when we had alternatives in our business? Yes, we did reduce our catering promotional activity because it would have been a lot of work for not a lot of effort or return. And we were lucky enough to use catering vehicles and colleagues in our retail side of our business. We did work with, we did try and engage with my pub shop as well to see if we could encourage some pubs to do some off trade, but I think licensing rules got in the way of that. Last point I would say is that the second and third lockdowns were very different. I think you can see on the roads, the level of activity is much higher anyway. And I would also say that the big multiple retailer supply chains were more prepared.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair comment. So that's the retrospective look, if you like. And we're now focusing and gearing up for April the 12th, the first staging post of the reopening. Clearly that's going to be only partial because it's only outside and it's very much weather dependent, but there are a number of challenges associated with that and future dates. So Coral, what do you and your members see as those key challenges as we look towards the 12th of April and beyond?
Morning, James and everybody. Two kind of very clear challenges right now. Firstly, stock. You've heard we don't know how much of the market's going to open, what the demand is going to be like, and are our suppliers really ready? Are they really geared up to give us all the stock they need? Our customers are going to be very demanding. They're going to expect 100% availability. And also, even if we do get the product, we also have the issue of Brexit for our member in Northern Ireland and getting the product over there. So issues around getting the production of stock. We also have stock in our warehouse. Obviously, there was a lot of wastage over the last 12 months, but we still have stock in the supply chain that is coming up to the end of its shelf life. Obviously, we're working through the FWD with DEFRA and RAP to get extensions to BBEs. And we would encourage caterers to accept this shelf life and understand that it is still safe to use to prevent even further wastage. The second of our key challenges is cash. We're having to invest in this additional stock holding at risk. We don't know if we're going to be able to move it on, but we still have to have it available for all our customers. But we also know that our customers are going to be expecting extended credit from us. So again, that puts an additional squeeze on us with our cash flow. There's also the issue that wholesalers maybe haven't performed as well as they would have liked to have done over the last 12 months. So in terms of getting credit availability from suppliers, the formula may say computer says no, but actually we would ask suppliers to look at that, look at the situation and see the growth of the market just to make sure that we're not squeezed even further.
So Andrew, Bid Food, we've got stock, we've got cash, we've got credit. Anything else to add to that mix?
No, I think availability, I think, is going to be key. I think Hugo touched on it, last time. Despite all the fact that we've had 3 months to plan coming out of lockdown, certain SKUs, certain products will take off more than we expect, and therefore, to me, it's about having the agility. We've got to be agile. We'll be needing our supplier partners to be agile to respond to the fluctuations in demand, no matter how much we've spent in terms of forecasting. I think there's a danger that we could be too cautious. I think we're all hopeful it's going to go absolutely crazy. I mean, we've got the joys of the British weather. It was 24 degrees yesterday and it's snowing next Tuesday, so I'm not sure what it's going to be on April the 12th. But if you saw those pictures from the parks in Nottingham and Leeds, just that release of pent up demand of just even getting out. Hopefully it's going to be like that in hospitality, without the fighting, hopefully. But that's what we're hoping for, is just that whole pent up demand to come through. So all of us have done a lot of planning, all of us have done a lot of preparing, but none of us are going to get it 100% right. So I think the key request I would have up and down the supply chain is really just about understanding. So not quite hashtag be kind, but hashtag be understanding. Our customers are going to have demands that they're not expecting. We'll be placing those demands on our suppliers. Suppliers will place demands on us. We have to understand that we're all entering into a new opportunity, and therefore we've got to work with each other to maximise the opportunity that's there with the challenges that are going to come. And I think the other point that would be that Tom touched on is around there's a degree of nervousness of people coming back to hospitality. So our customers will be looking to us and working with us to provide safety, security and hygiene solutions that try and assuage some of those fears from customers, so that we actually maximise the opportunity that's out there.
And do you think there's anything that you need from government with regard to, say, things like credit insurance to help facilitate the restart?
I mean, we've talked about credit insurance for a long time. There's a degree of insurers are honouring past credit insurance commitments, but clearly they're not giving credit insurance for businesses for the upcoming sales, and I think that's going to be a key challenge. And I'm sure from the supplier perspective, their credit insurance on wholesalers will have been reduced as well. So again, I think that's where you come back to the understanding element, is that we've all survived and we're all ready to reap the fruits of that resilience. And I think we just need to have that flexibility to support each other up and down the supply chain as we do that.
Hugo, I could see you nodding there when Andrew was talking about customer needs and the differing needs of different customers as we restart. Tom touched on that in his presentation. How does an organisation like Brakes respond to those differing customer needs as we move into what is essentially going to be a very different marketplace to the comparable market, say, in 2019?
Yeah, well, I think we are listening incredibly hard, as all wholesalers do. But the number of pulse surveys, etc., we've put out is unprecedented, really, to really try and put our finger on the pulse of exactly how our customers are feeling, and make sure that our response is insight-led. And really, our customers are talking about four things. They're talking about quality of products. They're talking about availability. They're talking about value. They've been through an incredibly lean period. And they're talking about safety. And so really our response is geared around those 4 points. We're working very hard with our suppliers to make sure that we can maximize availability of our brilliant range of products, but also make sure that there is some flexibility in there as well. As you know, my colleagues here have said, you know, nobody really knows what's going to happen in April. So, you know, if there is fluctuating demand, nobody wants more waste in the system. So, you know, we're going to need to have frozen alternatives and be creative with ambient products to make sure that we're not creating a big waste problem. On value, you know, we have a major launch this week of Help for Hospitality. It's a huge program of support for our customers, price holds, price cuts, service flexibility to make sure that even small value deliveries can be made. Everything to get our customers back up on their feet as quickly as we can. And then lastly, to safety, you know, we've all worked on that incredibly hard over the last year. You know, I think contactless delivery, contactless payment, you know, these are all features that are important right now. Whether they'll be as important 12 months time, we don't know. But, you know, we have a dedicated responsibility to make sure that our deliveries are safe and efficient. And when we come back as an industry, we want to make sure we come back for good this time. And that's what I think we all want.
Yeah, absolutely. In the words of Gary Barlow, we want to be back for good. Coral, your members, obviously dealing with their customers, obviously a lot, maybe smaller operators within the Country Range family, and what will they be looking for from the wholesalers under the umbrella of Country Range, and how do you meet those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, we deal with a whole wide variety of caterers, many of them independent operators of varying different sizes. But I think the key thing, which we've already referred to, is service. Caterers want 100% availability, but they also want minimum order quantities, reduced MOQs. They want probably more frequent deliveries. They haven't got the cash to invest in the stock, especially they're going to not sure of their turnover. They don't want to throw it away, so they'll be using their wholesaler as their storeroom. And so they'll be expecting more from their wholesaler, which in turn affects our profitability. But obviously we will do everything that we can to make sure that we get those customers up and running. As Hugo said, we want to make sure that we're their partner, we're working with them. We want to be flexible, and we are. We're there, you know, work with them on a local basis and can give them every bit of support they need. We expect a lot of just-in-time ordering, just to make sure that a caterer, it depends on the weather, doesn't it, completely, especially the period between April the 12th and May the 17th. Although I know caterers now are taking in advance bookings and getting payment for that, so that at least they get some kind of money because of the issues that happened last year. Our caterers want extended credit facilities. They also want more time to pay off old debts that may be outstanding from last year, to help them with their cash flow right now. And they also want insight and support. They want advice on how they can maximise the reopening, the things they need to do, what they need to do to get their business back on track. Menu advice, looking at trends. We produce our Stir It Up magazine. All through last year, we continued to do that, offering support and advice for whatever element of the market was open and what they needed to do and how they could respond and react in the right way. Whether it's targeting those working from home, Tom mentioned that in his presentation, those people, if they want to get out from their, you know, their four walls and their kids and dogs and everything else and go and sit in a cafe or a pub, you know, how can caterers maximise that side of the market? How can they maximise social media to, you know, to encourage footfall? How can they encourage the consumer back from the retail food to go? And how can they make their the experience so that it's actually worth going out of home for, and you don't get one of those takeaway boxes? So all those things, we're giving those caterers that support and that information.
You touched there on pre-bookings. What did you think to Tom Fender's Netflix style subscription for people to sort of pay in advance and then cash in when they want to go out? Sounds an interesting model, but it's not something I've heard of before.
No, it's novel, isn't it? But I think it's, you know, I think wasn't it Tom who had a group of 60 people who cancelled and just didn't turn up. So you can understand, especially if you're buying in things like protein, chilled foods, where you just can't really, there's no other market for that. And there is a huge surge in demand. I know a lot of people that I've spoken to, the place is, booked up solid for 2 weeks. So people are resigned to the fact that they can't go out. So it's nothing worse than having empty seats when you could have filled those and had that business and that turnover.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the challenges of the first lockdown, of course, the excess stock that it created, and working with suppliers on that was really important. So, Andrew, just taking the question that Hugo and Coral answered and then moving it further upstream, given those customer needs and demands, how will you be working with suppliers to be able to meet that challenge?
Yeah, I think we've obviously touched on a few of them already. It's around availability, credit, and the agility to respond to changes in demand. But I think once things have reopened, then it's about how do you accelerate forward from there. I think we'll be looking for insight from our suppliers. I'm sure the suppliers are doing a lot of research of what's happening once reopening happens. So, we need to have that shared up and down the supply chain so that we can share that with customers and all act accordingly. I think innovation, to a certain extent, people just want to get out again and experience eating out again. But also, I think Tom highlighted in his report that they're expecting a very high standard. They're expecting something they can't do at home. They're expecting something different. And therefore, we know that, opening is the first challenge, but then continuing with innovation, continuing with things like the trends towards vegan, vegetarian, those sorts of things. We'll be looking for more innovation for suppliers once they're back up and running. And I think increasingly sustainability, packaging, and all those things will come back on the agenda very quickly. We all have fairly short memories. In 3 months' time, it will be what pandemic, and let's talk about the next things that are happening in the market. And we can't. Once we restart, we've got to switch back onto those sorts of developments and innovations that we were looking at before.
Yeah, and we're already starting to see that with some of the government agenda shifting to things like DRS and extended producer responsibility and HFSS, calorie labelling on menus. There's all of that allergen law, of course, Natasha's law coming in later in the year. So there's all of that to deal with, as well as the challenges of the restart. So it's going to be a bumpy road, I think, for the next few months. And Dowd, if I could just ask you the same question, but as a hybrid business, do you have different demands of your suppliers on the retail and the catering side?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the word flexibility is key. No one can predict the future. We're all watching what's going on in Europe at the moment with great interest, a wave 3. But clearly we're further ahead on our vaccination program. So, but even a year ago, we didn't think we were going to go into lockdown 2 or 3, for that matter. So, however, what's clear is we are opening up. We're going to be opening up slowly. Pubs are able to serve people outside if they're seated. So I think only about 38% of outlets have outdoor space. And the throughput will be limited by their capacity to do something safely and securely as such. So it won't be like flicking a switch. It'll be a gradual increase as people gain confidence over a period of time. And as that happens, yes, what does that mean for retail? So I think in the short term, that means, for example, alcohol sales through retail outlets will probably continue to be relatively strong, especially with the timing of the Euros as well. But as people start going to their high streets, their parks, even their towns and cities, there will be a transition towards instant consumption, impulse sales again, which is by and large been hit quite badly. Of course, yes, there is this apparently large amount of cash in the banks that people have saved by not spending their money, but I think there is quite a lot of anxiety generally in relation to economic well-being. So I think value will be important. So I would summarize that all by saying we need flexibility, but actually we need to get the basics right. It's about landing the absolute simple things really well and as effectively and efficiently as possible. I think obviously innovation, NPD is a wonderful thing, and we're big fans of that, but you've got to choose your battles.
Choose your battles wisely, absolutely. So a couple more questions before we take the questions from the floor. I can see questions coming in, which is great. Please do keep those coming. Obviously, we're in a different world now. I don't think anyone would pretend any different, and we're probably operating at about 85% of 2019 at best estimates. So, Hugo, what impact has that had on the brakes business, and what changes have you made? What will that mean going forward? And then we're not going to get back to that 100%. So where will the additional business come from?
Well, let me get out the crystal ball and speculate a little bit, James. Look, I mean, I think it would be fair to say that probably somewhere in the region of 10 to 15% of food service outlets have gone through closure, administration, etc. So, you know, the high street is going to look very different, at least in the short term. And that is a profound impact on our industry. Now, of course, consumer habits have also changed because they can't go out. And in my view, they've been trying to replicate the eat out at home experience in the home. So, you know, takeaways of various different qualities and levels of creativity have become the norm. We've seen a massive rise in delivered services and in meal kits. And I suppose the question really is, you know, what do you do with your business model? We initially at Brakes, like many others, have taken some painful decisions to make sure that the size of our organization matches the market. But we're also creatively looking at where is this pound of food service spend going to end up? Is it going to come back into the industry, or is it going to float around in adjacent areas around the market? And that's what we're thinking about right now. I mean, I happen to take the view that some of these changes will be forever changes, and some of them, as Andrew was saying earlier, are going to be temporary and it'll be a blip and we'll just get over it. So what I admire about our industry as a collective is it's innovative and it's fast moving and it's agile. And what will happen is that the high street will come back and it might look a little bit different. And staycations, you know, will be trends that drive volume. And so I'm actually optimistic about what is going to happen, even if over the next 12, 18 months is going to be a bit unpredictable and it's going to be a bit lumpy and it's going to be a bit strange for everybody. But as ever, as wholesalers, we have to be agile and we have to listen to our market very carefully, and we have to be ready to be extremely responsive in ensuring that we serve our customers really well.
Coral, do you have any fundamental changes in the business model within CRG as a result of what we've seen over the last year?
I think we'd be foolish just to carry on as normal. We have to look at what's happened, look at what's going on in the marketplace. As Hugo said, there's lots of things going on. We've referenced the growth of food to go in retail and convenience, and that's an area that some members are looking at how we can maximise in that sector. There's been a huge investment in technology, looking more at moving into e-commerce, looking at new categories, and also looking at many members invested in a B2C platform during the pandemic, and that is staying for some. It's resonated, especially in certain sectors and categories. Looking at our business mix, obviously the areas that are less risky, and so the care sector kept going throughout, and I think that's something where members are realigning the sectors that they supply. And then I'd probably say, looking at our categories and our category management, there was a lot of stock written off, a lot of waste, and I think it caused everybody to rethink and have a look at the products that we're stocking. And every product needs to warrant and pay for itself in the warehouse. We need to make sure that we give our customers choice. So it's not just about rationalizing the range, but it's also looking at investing in new categories, making sure that we have the right range for our customers as we get into new trends. We've talked about the growth of vegan, and Tom talked about what caterers and what consumers are looking for. Just making sure that we have the growth in those categories that enable our caterers to be able to service that offer.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I'm going to just ask one question before we go to the questions from the audience, mindful of time and the fact it's an interactive session. So I think if we were having this panel 12 months, 13 months ago, we would have been talking about only one issue and one issue alone. And this is very much a safe space, but I'm afraid I am going to go there. Brexit. We can't ignore it. Obviously, we've got a number of different grace periods in place for the movement of goods into the UK and across to Northern Ireland, which will perhaps make the impacts slightly less than they would have been had we been seeing full checks from January the 1st. But Andrew, what effect is Brexit going to have on the sector as we move into the recovery phase?
Well, I think, as you say, James, we were talking about it all the time. We're talking about the troubles it may bring. I think the only blessing you can take from lockdown is it just meant that those volumes in the first quarter were well down on normal, and therefore it's given all of us a chance to learn the new ropes, really, learn the new systems, learn the new paperwork, iron out some of the bumps, and the fact that, you know, further sort of developments of legislation have been pushed back to later in the year again, just I think helps ease that transition through. So I would say it's gone as well as could have been hoped for, to be honest. I have no doubt that as we enter into the next quarter and volumes start to ramp up, then we will start to see some bumps and some issues. But yeah, I think generally speaking, it's a problem that we're dealing with as ever. You know, it's just getting used to the new legislations, restrictions, you know, veterinary requirements, etc. But we've had time to learn. We'll have a further chance to learn. You know, I think some of the things you mentioned earlier, you know, Natasha's law, you know, packaging tax, etc., are probably bigger challenges for us coming down the road than obviously Brexit, where the big challenge was, will the change on the 1st of January screw up the supply chain? And it didn't. It's not going to be without its bumps, but it's functioning. And therefore, I think, you know, we need to focus our attention more around, you know, Natasha's law, packaging tax, high fat, sugar, salt, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the can has been well and truly kicked down the road, quite rightly, because it'd be impossible to deal with that and sort of at the same time as we're dealing with recovery and all the other issues as we get back to business as usual. Let's not forget all of those as well. Right, I'm going to introduce Anita now, who is going to take some of the questions that you've been posing via the chat, and then we're going to ask panel members to answer them as appropriate. So Anita, over to you.
Thanks a lot, James. Well, we've had a lot of questions coming in, and especially around workplace. So the first question is from David Field from Arla, which is, many of you supply offices and forecasters are suggesting the sector will never recover to pre-COVID levels and that it will be closer to 50%. Do you agree?
Hugo, do you agree that the era of people going into offices and buying lunch near their workplace or at their workplace has come to an end as we know it, and we're into a hybrid system now? And how do you deal with that new normal situation?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, David. So look, nobody really knows. When we talk to our large workplace customers, they're saying that they're expecting a bit more like 60% return in the next 12 months. But nonetheless, I think you've mentioned the right word, James, is we're going to get a hybrid. And I don't think that's unhealthy. I think there are some people that have really welcomed working at home, and there are some people climbing the walls waiting to get back into the office, and we have everything in between. So we need to be flexible. Organizations are going to have to think very hard about how they get the right balance into their organizations. But I really do think, as maybe Andrew suggested earlier, you know, it'll all be different for several months, and then it will really start to come back to how many of us remembered it. But there will be certain structural changes that will be forever. So I think that that pound of food service spend will just turn up in a different place. So it's going to turn up in the suburbs where people live rather than turn up in the cities where they went to work. So, you know, it'll still come to the industry and our supply base, but it's just likely to come to us in a different way and in a different location.
Yeah, the demand is still there. It's just the supply that changes. So, Dow, quickly from you, that's good news for convenience, isn't it? People are operating as a hybrid and staying local.
Yes, absolutely. It's great for local convenience, but let's not forget there are a lot of local convenience outlets that operate in inner city locations who have also seen a massive fall in passing trade. So it's a mixed result. I think there's a lot of shopkeepers out there that are hoping that people do return to their offices and do start walking past their front door more and more. I think obviously there's going to be further hybridation though in terms of what is a convenience outlet and what is effectively a food to go outlet, and what is the difference between the two. But yes, absolutely. I think local convenience is going to be at a better growth rate than it was pre-COVID.
Interesting. Anita, have we got another question?
Yes, and funnily enough, you must be seeing my questions because Hannah McAnini asked the exact question around whether consumers will stay local, but she also added, will wholesale ranges need to reflect this more moving forward?
So, Coral, will we see a different mix of products on sale in wholesale to reflect this new normality?
Yes, and I think that's the beauty of our members. They can they operate within their local area. So they'll either be working with local suppliers and also be understanding what the needs are within their local communities. So that's about the whole category management piece I was talking about, making sure that it's specific for the sector and for the community.
So gathering data and insights really important there, I suppose.
Yes.
Anita, another question?
Great. Well, obviously staycations are very much, I think, on everyone's mind at the moment. I know they're on mine. We've had a question in from Gary Lunt who says, if staycation becomes significant, how will suppliers respond to demand, but more importantly, credit limits for independent wholesalers?
Sounds like a question for you, Coral. Staycation. I don't recognise the term, by the way. Staycation, I think, is not going anywhere. Holiday in the UK is not a staycation; it's a holiday. It just happens to be in the UK. So, what will be the impact of that on the independent wholesale sector?
I think that the question that I think David is referring to is what suppliers are going to do to make sure that they can cope with the influx of demand. And I think that's the point, is what all of us have said. We really need to make sure that we work with our suppliers. One thing the pandemic has brought is a closer sense of community, I think, between wholesalers and through the supply chain. And it's really important that they continue to work with us and that they understand that there may be a greater need for demand. I think David in his question referred to the credit limits. I think he's looking at wholesalers, and that was the other question that we referred to earlier on. We really need our suppliers to work with us to make sure that we can meet the capacity and meet the requirements and demands of our caterers, however much they flux.
So it's going to be a positive situation to deal with, but not without its challenges, I suppose. Anita, have we got another question?
Wonderful. Yes, innovation's been running throughout the whole conversation, and Harry Fortnum mentions that Andrew and Darwood have touched nicely on NPD. Operators have been running limited menus. Do you see this continuing? And if so, for how long? Or do you foresee us shifting back to being innovation driven?
Andrew, is it going to be a limited offer, or are we going to go back to the innovative ways of working that we saw a couple of years ago?
I think certainly we haven't limited our offer. I think certainly, as Hugo was saying, there's a desire to reduce waste up and down the supply chain. So maybe customers will be operating some element of limited menu, or maybe customers will be switching towards more value-added, pre-prepared elements to the menu, which enable them to manage their costs and their margins accordingly. I think at the end of the day, customers are going to buy quality, value, and convenience. So you've got to be able to offer that, and you've got to be able to offer it across all tastes. So as we were saying, vegan and vegetarian will feature very strongly. Healthy options, all those things you've got to be able to offer. So if you offer too limited a menu, you're not going to get the traction. So I think workplace was mentioned earlier. I'm very hopeful about workplace. Historically, workplace used to be competing against all the hospitality outlets that were operating outside, and whether people would go out of the workplace to eat. Now, some of those will have disappeared. So there's an opportunity to capture that back into the workplace, but only if you're offering that quality, value, and convenience. And innovation is a key part of driving that, because innovation is not just about new products; it's about new types of preparation, new types of value add, new types of pre-prepared elements to the offering.
Yeah, it's a good point. You can have innovation within that limited menu, I suppose.
Yeah.
The two things aren't exclusive. Anita, have we got any more questions?
Yeah, we've got quite a lot. In terms of sustainability, I know that's been mentioned, and Paul Fieldhouse says, how have the panel's businesses' environmental and sustainability plans changed in the past 12 months? And what will their key issues be moving forward?
Hugo, sustainability, a big part of the brakes operation. Presumably it hasn't changed over the last 12 months, and presumably your plans are the same going forward. But where does it sit now within the business?
Yeah, sorry, I just lost you there for a second, James. I think I caught that from Paul, thanks. Look, our commitment to our CSR leadership and agenda and sustainability has been resolute throughout this. You don't change your core values for a crisis. So my belief is that there is a fantastic opportunity right now with consumer awareness and government awareness of the importance of food, where it comes from, the scarcity that we had 9-12 months ago, and the key workers that actually work in food from field to delivery to outlet. And I think as an industry, we have to capitalize on that. There needs to be more education about the supply chain, the importance of supply chain, and that gives us all a great opportunity to make sure that we have quality products delivered in the most sustainable and ethically sourced way, and that we're very proud of that, and we shout about it, because I think one of the learnings of this pandemic is the general understanding and the level of importance that is put on the supply chain is less than we all probably realized, and this is a moment for change.
Very much a moment for change. Anita, I think we've probably got time for a couple more. Have you got any pithy questions that we can answer?
There's a particularly there's a particularly pithy question from Anonymous, who's been sending in quite a lot of questions. The question is, do you anticipate seeing a reduction in delivered wholesalers and an increase in consolidation of supply categories moving forward?
Okay. Coral, consolidation in the marketplace, is that something you anticipate?
I think the next couple of months are going to be pretty critical within our sector. I think I mentioned one of the key issues is cash. I know for a lot of wholesalers, it's going to be about making sure they can have the cash flow. There is likely to be consolidation of some sort, I am sure, over the next 12, 18 months. As I said, the next couple of months we'll see. It depends how the market picks up, but I do think there will be some changes as a result of this pandemic.
That's one of the things we haven't actually seen really over the last 12 months. We've seen a lot of businesses go to the brink, but no actual consolidation. So, and previous to that, it was happening at pace. So I expect you're right that it is going to be coming down the road in the next couple of months. Anita, another couple of quick questions.
Yeah, one from Mark Standish, who's basically said, very insightful session, thank you. He's interested in understanding the predicted impact of reduced tourism and overseas visitors on our industry. And does the panel have a view on this? And in particular, when this will be back to the usual rate?
Okay, Andrew, can we replace the foreign tourism with people having their staycations? And if not, when will we see people coming back to the UK?
Yeah, I think we can. I think I would challenge the assertion that it's going to take us 12 or 18 months to get back to normal. I think if we look at our sort of big core businesses in China, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand, yeah, I understand they didn't have as harsh a lockdown as we did, and you can't directly make a comparison, but all of those businesses are now trading above 2019 levels. And if you take Australia and New Zealand, where they obviously rely a lot on international tourism, they're finding two things. One is, as we've alluded to before, people in the suburbs are eating more. There's more regional business going on, but also even in Auckland, Sydney, those places, Australians and New Zealanders are going to there. How many of us have never been to London because it's full of bloody tourists, and now we'll actually take the opportunity to go and visit all those places that we haven't been before. So it's not going to be 100% replacement, and certainly those 5-star hotels in the city that rely on international tourists may struggle because we wouldn't necessarily want to pay those prices. But I think in terms of destinations and leisure and restaurants, I think they will be less affected than people think. It won't be 100% replacement, but overall I think the market will come back to where it was, and that will vary by sector and by region, but I don't think anybody will be completely decimated.
So I think we are probably out of time, which is a real shame, because I think there's a number of questions there that we haven't got to. So we'll have to organise, or Lorraine will have to organise another of these sessions in a couple of weeks so we can get through those questions. So Lorraine, over to you.
Thanks ever so much, James. Apologies for running slightly over time, but we didn't want to cut everybody short and not answer some of the questions that we have. So that actually concludes our event for today. And I'd like to thank everyone for their fantastic insight. So Tom, you've just reappeared. So thank you for an excellent presentation. Andrew, Hugo, Coral and Darwood for their superb insight into the wholesale sector, and James for being an excellent panel chair. Also, I'd like to thank Anita for handling our questions, and also James Beer from 23 Digital for the technical backup. And also, last but not least, general supporter of you, our audience, and also not forgetting our headline sponsor, TWC, the wholesale company. So with all Arena events, we'd really value your feedback on today's event. So when you leave, a very brief survey, it's actually going to be less than 2 minutes, will pop into your browser. So we'd really appreciate it if you could complete this. I know one of the things that came through, and certainly in the questions, was on workplace catering, and what is actually going to be the return to workplace catering, and will we get a hybrid model? Well, that's actually going to be an event that we're going to be running on the 15th of April called Food Service Reopen Right, which is sponsored by Britvic, and it's actually going to be focusing on the key changes affecting the food service sector, in particular B&I, and looking at what plans are being put in place to welcome back employees and how companies can work together to develop solutions. And that's actually going to be hosted by Anita too. We've got CH&Co, ISS and Aramark on there, and also Britvic too. So that's going to be available for you to register now, and again it's free. So thank you once again everyone for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you again soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.